301. Magic Net. The mirror was clear and set in a golden frame, small and exquisitely crafted. Bilbo found it strange that Dwyer would give him such a little thing. As he held it closer to study it, a cartoonish yellow baby dragon suddenly appeared in the previously blank glass. "Hello, Master. Please bind your identity and complete authentication to get the best use out of the mirror said in a polite voice. Bilbo nearly dropped it. "What are you?" he blurted. "I am your mirror butler, Master. I assist you in contacting other mirrors remotely, and I can help you with many things," the little dragon announced in a surprisingly human way. Bilbo's mouth fell open. "You mean I can use this mirror to contact other people who have mirrors?" The baby dragon nodded. "Yes, but first, Master, you must complete identity authentication and bind this mirror to yourself." "How do I do that?" "Just follow my prompts. Please place your entire face within the mirror's view. Please nod. Please blink." Somewhat bemused, Bilbo did as he was told, following the dragon's instructions for facial movements. "Authentication complete. Congratulations, Master. You now fully own this mirror," the dragon crowed. "From now on, no one else can use it without your permission. Also, if you don't like my current appearance, you can change my skin." "A new appearance? Like what?" Bilbo asked, curious. The dragon immediately shifted into a chubby little bird, crackling with tiny bolts of lightning. "This is the Thunderbird skin." Then it became a cool little green snake wearing sunglasses. "This is the Basilisk skin." Next it morphed into a feisty, waving octopus. Giant octopus. There are also Pegasus, Griffin, Cerberus, Hippogriff. The mirror spirit cycled through several more forms. If you prefer, there are elf, orc, troll, warg, ringwraith, and even Sauron skins. And if none please you, you can design one yourself. "Wait, Sauron? You have a Sauron skin?" Bilbo's eyes widened in alarm. "Of course," the mirror spirit said, puffing with pride, and then shifted into a comically dark silhouette with a burning, fiery eye behind it. Its voice turned oddly cold and theatrical. "Master, what do you think? Shall I set this skin?" Bilbo shivered and shook his head so hard he almost rattled the frame. No, that would be dreadful. I prefer the dragon." He could not imagine liking a Sauron's skin. The mirror spirit promptly reverted to the cheerful baby dragon. "Excellent taste, Master. I prefer this skin as well. That's why I chose it initially." "Would you like to contact Lord Dwyer now?" it asked. "Yes, let's," Bilbo said, impatience brightening his voice. The baby dragon clattered against a tiny inset mirror that had appeared inside the main one. "Hey, number 3, open up. My master, Mr. Bilbo Baggins, requests a video call with Lord Dwyer." Another golden baby dragon poked half its body through the inner mirror and punched the yellow dragon so hard the latter went sea stars, literally. "What's the hurry? If you break the screen, will you pay for it? Besides, my master is on a call. Wait your turn." Bilbo shrank back at the sight. Not all mirror spirits were so polite. The inner mirror suddenly expanded until it merged with the outer glass. Both baby dragons vanished, and Dwyer's smiling face filled the surface. "Long time no see, Bilbo," he said. "This is a two-way mirror. You can use it to contact me, Gandalf, Balin, and others at any time. If we're busy, leave a message and the mirror spirit will notify us." "This is marvelous. Thank you, Dwyer," Bilbo said, delighted. Becoming Dwyer's friend and receiving his gifts felt like the luckiest turn of his life. He had already been given the elixir of life, which had added 10 years to his lifespan and prevented him from aging for that decade. Dwyer had even promised to give him another bottle every 10 years on his birthday. Compared to that, the mirror was almost a trifle, though he was grateful all the same. They chatted a while longer, then ended the call. They all thanked Dewey for the gift. As people explored the mirror's features, leaving messages, creating groups, sharing images and scenes, the magic web the mirrors formed came alive. Balin quickly became the realm's publicity king, posting life in Moria, mithril mining, rowdy feasts, and the daily grind of dwarven halls to an eager audience. Bjorn uploaded a recording of his bear form fighting a band of orcs in the Misty Mountains. "302, Bloodline Fusion Potion." Edward's face went blank with disbelief. "My lord, are you saying I could become a wizard? Use magic like you?" As steward of the castle, Edward had seen wonders most people never imagined: moving portraits, shifting staircases, fire salamanders in the hearth, armor that patrolled the halls. He had long loved his work and felt honored to serve, but those marvels had planted a longing in him. Once someone had seen a fairyland, how could they be content remaining a mere mortal? He knew, of course, that magical talent was rare and innate. He had always assumed he lacked it. So he buried the desire and worked diligently. Now to be offered a chance, sudden, fragile, impossible, stirred a joy in him that bordered on disbelief. Dewey smiled and nodded. "I have a potion that allows a person to fuse with the bloodline of a magical creature. The fusion can grant the ability to wield magic. There are risks. Will you try?" "I will," Edward blurted without a second thought. Even a sliver of hope was enough. "I want this. I want to become a wizard." "Very well," Dewey said. "Prepare yourself. We'll do the bloodline fusion in a few days." A week later, Dewey had gathered the necessary materials and readied the potion room. Bloodline fusion was notoriously dangerous. Even siblings could have incompatible blood. Fusing the bloodlines of different races, human and magical, could trigger conflicts that led to genetic collapse. Dewey was careful to make the severity clear. "Edward," he said before they began, "you must understand, once the fusion starts, it cannot be stopped. The process will be agonizing, like having your tendons torn and marrow drawn and your blood replaced. Can you endure it?" Edward did not hesitate. He nodded firmly. "My lord, I'm ready. To become a wizard, I'll risk my life." Dewey's eyes showed a flash of respect. He softened and patted Edward's shoulder. "Since your mind is made up, I won't try to dissuade you. I hope you succeed. If you do, I'll make you a wand myself." "Thank you, my lord. I will succeed," Edward said, already picturing himself with a wand. Dewey led him into the potion room. The chamber was spacious and smelled of herbs and metal. In the center stood a huge cauldron, large enough to hold an adult, set above a roaring fire. The potion inside had been simmering for 3 days. Mandrake juice, dried nettles, moonstone, scurvy grass, ashwinder eggs, and more had been added in sequence until it reached the late stage of brewing. The liquid was murky and gray. Dewey took a silver-white tree fruit and dropped it into the pot. He stirred 13 times clockwise with a heavy wooden paddle, then 7 times counterclockwise. The fruit dissolved like quicksilver, the broth clearing to water-like transparency. Dewey snuffed the fire and let the liquid cool. When the potion was fully cool, he fetched a refrigerated barrel of dragon blood and poured it all into the cauldron until it was 2/3 full. The clear liquid turned ruby red and began to boil. Dewey kept stirring. The mixture roiled like molten lava, hot enough that heat waves shimmered across the room. Edward watched, transfixed and afraid. "All right, Edward," Dewey said. "Take off your clothes and get into the cauldron." Edward stared at the seething lava-like liquid. "Get in?" His mouth went dry. Wouldn't the heat boil him alive? Seeing Dewey's steady expression, he swallowed pride and fear and undressed. Without hesitation, he climbed and then jumped into the cauldron. Plop! Most of his body was submerged. Only his head remained above the surface. An instant later, his face twisted and he screamed. The potion felt like molten metal against his skin, every pore a furnace. It was as if millions of tiny fiery worms bored into him, threading through his veins. He felt scalded from the outside and from within, as if his blood itself had become a stream of lava. Black blood began to bleed from his pores, seeping over his skin until he was soaked in it like a man turning into a living stain. Despite Edward's cries and attempts to scramble free, Dewey waved a hand and pressed him back into the cauldron. The fusion had reached a critical stage. Any interruption would mean failure, and failure meant death. Dewey could not let the process stop now. Edward had served him well as steward. The thought of losing him pained Dewey, but he kept his face calm and his grip firm. If the ritual worked, the rewards would be great. Time stretched. Edward's screams thinned into ragged gasps. The potion's surface cooled and its color dulled. The black blood that had poured from him thickened and spread until it wove around his body, forming a corded dark cocoon. Then the room fell silent. The cauldron shifted. Two hands burst through the blood cocoon. Edward emerged, naked and drenched, like a newly hatched dragonette peeling out of a shell. He upwards gasped for air, every breath a revelation. His body looked stronger, more compact. His eyes were no longer brown, but a sharp golden slitted like a dragon's. "My lord," he said, voice trembling with both fear and wonder. "Did I succeed?" 303. Become a wizard. Become a wizard. Dewey didn't answer at once. He just stood there, watching the blood-covered man climb out of the cauldron. Scourgify! With a flick of his hand, he wiped the blood and residue from the cauldron and from Edward's body. He summoned Edward's clothes and tossed them into the cauldron. Put them on first. He didn't want to see a naked man clambering out of a cauldron. After Edward dressed and stepped out, Dewey noticed he'd not only grown stronger, but taller. Edward approached hesitantly, his face full of uncertainty. Dewey pulled a wand from his pocket and handed it over. "Try it." Edward took the wand with careful reverence, as if holding something priceless and fragile. With a mixture of determination and unease, he gripped it and made a trembling, practiced gesture. "Lumos." Dewey raised an eyebrow as he watched the standard wand motion. A moment later, a point of light flared at the wand's tip, then flickered and went out like a loose connection. The faint success drove Edward almost to tears. His voice shook and his eyes shone red. "My lord, did I just succeed? Am I dreaming?" Seeing that expression brought Dewey back to his own first awakening. He smiled and nodded. "Congratulations. You just cast a spell. You're a wizard." Through his magical perception, Dewey could see that Edward's body, fused with the dragon bloodline, had formed a functioning magical circulation. His power wasn't high, hardly comparable to a typical elf, but he was a wizard. Confirmed by Dewey's words, Edward burst into tears of joy. He waved the wand again and again, making the tip glow, grinning wider each time. Then he tried another spell. Incendio. Flames shot out wildly, more than Edward expected, and he panicked, not knowing how to put them out. Dewey waved his hand and snuffed the fire out without fuss. He looked at Edward with a shake of his head and a gentle voice. "Don't be nervous. Your movements are correct. The problem is that this wand doesn't suit you, so the magic was unstable. Besides, because you're bound to the dragon bloodline, you have a natural talent for fire magic. If you study it, you could eventually become a master of fire spells." Edward's heart swelled at the encouragement. He clapped his hands. "All right, now that you've transformed, go to the library and study the basic standard spellbooks. I'll make you a proper wand. I think I know what materials to use." "Thank you, Lord Dewey. If it hadn't been for you, I'd have been devoured by that troll, let alone had a chance to become a wizard." Edward knelt, gratitude and loyalty shining in his eyes. Dewey could see it was sincere and felt his own relief. He helped him up. "No need for such ceremony. I know you're loyal. Now that you have magic, continue to serve me faithfully and guard this castle." "Yes," Edward answered solemnly. Over the next week, Dewey crafted a wand made for him, 12¼ inches, oak, with a dragon heartstring core. With his own wand in hand, Edward threw himself into learning. Dewey opened the library and allowed Edward to consult the spellbooks and to ask Dewey or his portrait any questions he couldn't solve. Edward learned quickly. In barely over a month, he mastered most basic spells and became, in Dewey's words, a wizard butler. Edward kept the wand close every day, casually revealing it when directing the castle staff. He became indispensable, waving his wand to dust and clean, light fireplaces, levitate things hung too high, and mend broken items. Word spread fast through the castle and down the mountain. Butler Edward, who had been an ordinary man, had suddenly become a wizard. People who had known him before were curious and amazed. With Dewey's permission, Edward explained how it had happened, and the idea that Dewey could grant ordinary people magic both shocked and inflamed desire. Magic was a dream for countless people. Many longed for Dewey's favor so they could become wizards too. News reached Mayor Luke of Hogsmeade and Ratch of Bree. Both men immediately came, excited at the prospect. They had built their towns to remarkable positions, second only to the very top, with influence over thousands. They lacked neither status nor wealth. What they wanted was the wonder of magic itself. "You want to become wizards as well?" Dewey asked when they appeared together. Luke nodded earnestly. "My lord, I know this is a bold request, but I have no other wish now. I just want to feel the wonder of magic. I'm willing to pay any price." Ratch echoed him quickly. "My lord, if I can become a wizard, I'll give up my position and all my wealth. I beg for your grace." Dewey was surprised. Ratch prized wealth and power above almost everything, yet now he was willing to abandon them. He regarded the two men kneeling before him, determination plain on their faces, and said calmly, "I can grant your request." Before they could react in gratitude, Dewey added, "But becoming a wizard requires enduring pain beyond what ordinary people can bear, no less than having your tendons pulled and your marrow drawn out." He waved his hand and projected the scene of Edward's transformation before them. The cauldron boiled like lava, Edward's screams rose, and his bloodied, tortured form writhed. Both men froze, hearts turning to ice. That heat, wasn't it like being cooked alive? Their eyes widened, and even Luke, who recovered first, could only steady himself with effort. "My lord," Luke said, his expression still determined, even after seeing the torment, "I'm willing to accept the risk." Ratch had a moment of hesitation, but seeing the magical display and the possibility pushed him to stand tall again. "My lord, as long as I can become a wizard, I will take that risk." Dewey ended the vision and smiled. "Since you're resolute, I will grant your wish." In a separate room, a large cauldron sat over a recently extinguished fire. The potion inside steamed and boiled. Dewey waited until the cauldron had cooled, then poured 2 large buckets of dragon blood into it and stirred without stopping. The reaction was violent. The mixture turned into a churning, magma-like liquid that radiated intense heat. It looked as if anything dropped in would be instantly cooked. Mayor Luke and Ratch, who had been waiting nearby, swallowed hard. Cold sweat ran down their faces. They had been shown what to expect and had been prepared, but seeing it now still made their hearts pound. "All right, you two, take off your clothes and get in," Dewey said. He'd switched to a larger cauldron for this purpose, big enough for 2 people. The men exchanged a look, drew a deep breath as if going to their deaths, and began to undress. Dewey, uninterested in seeing 2 elderly men naked, turned his head away. He'd insisted they strip because ordinary fabrics like cotton or linen could contaminate the potion, risking failure or producing poison. They stripped quickly, climbed onto a high stool, and plunged into the boiling cauldron together. With 2 splashes, they submerged almost completely. Only their heads remained above the surface. Their faces instantly twisted in agony, as if they'd fallen into molten rock. Luke clenched his teeth and let out painful groans. Ratch screamed like a pig, a sound that echoed through the empty room and even carried outside. Edward, the castle butler, heard the scream and couldn't help a small, vindictive smile, a grim satisfaction that others were finally enduring what he had. Arwen, watering flowers in the garden, also heard it. She paused, then continued. She was intrigued by this way of granting ordinary people magical ability and knew her husband was cultivating more wizards. She supported Dewey wholeheartedly and quietly continued gathering potion ingredients for him. In the cauldron, the scalding potion didn't just burn them on the surface. It seeped into their pores, entered their blood vessels, flowed to their hearts and bone marrow. The heat felt like it was burning out their organs. Streams of black blood were squeezed from their eyes, ears, noses, and pores. Ratch tried to scramble free, but Dewey waved his wand and conjured a wooden mallet. Like a game of whack-a-mole, he knocked Ratch back under until the process finished. After some time, both men were wrapped in thick blood-coated cocoons and fell silent. The potion had been fully absorbed by them, only faint bloodstains and diluted liquid remained. Finally, the cocoons burst and the two men emerged, gasping for air. "I'm younger?" Ratch cried, running his hands over his skin in disbelief. Near 60 before, his face had been etched with wrinkles and age spots. Now he looked 20 years younger, a vigorous man of about 40. Luke, who had been middle-aged, now appeared to be in his early 30s. They stood in the cauldron, delighted, examining themselves and each other, oblivious to their nakedness. Dewey had no patience for that spectacle. He flicked his wrist, cast a scouring charm that cleaned the cauldron and washed the stains from their bodies, then tossed their discarded clothes aside. "Enough gawking. Put your clothes on and get out." "Oh, right." They snapped back to reality, hurriedly dressing, faces still beaming with astonished joy. Neither had expected such a dramatic result. Becoming 2 decades younger was an enormous windfall. Once they were clothed, Ratch blurted out anxiously, "Lord, are we wizards now?" Luke stared at Dewey, hopeful. Dewey smiled and shook his head, watching their hopes dip. "Not yet. You don't have proper wands, and you haven't learned any spells. You're at best quasi-wizards." Both men exhaled heavily. Dewey hadn't meant to frighten them. He took 2 wands from his pocket and handed them over. "Use these for now. Go to the archives and find standard spell books, or ask Butler Edward. He mastered basic spells before you and can coach you. If you still need help, consult my portrait, or come to me when I have time." The wands were simple, made from malong tree branches with elf hair cores, universal practice wands Dewey had crafted in his spare time. The two received them like precious treasures, cradling them as if they might break. Their gratitude and loyalty toward Dewey deepened. Given permission, they hurried to Dewey's archives. The room that greeted them was vast, like a library that stretched as wide as several football fields, expanded by an undetectable extension charm. Rows upon rows of shelves rose high, packed with books. Dewey had collected texts from all over Middle-earth, elf treatises, dwarf craftsmanship manuals, Numenorean histories, even grim volumes from Orcs and Mordor. On top of that, he had compiled all the knowledge and books he'd obtained from the Harry Potter world through his sign-ins: spells, transfiguration, potions, astronomy, herbology, runes, alchemy, and more. Only the most dangerous dark arts tomes, things like Secrets of the Darkest Art and Curses and Countercurses, were confined to a single restricted section, accessible only to Dewey or with his permission. Books fluttered and hovered like birds between the stacks. The two newcomers froze, overwhelmed, until they noticed a quill rapidly writing in a blank book on a golden desk placed directly opposite the entrance. They felt like true novices, unsure where to begin. Just then, the butler Edward came in from the doorway. Seeing the two mayors' helpless faces, a small smile flickered at the corners of his eyes. "Mayor Luke, Mayor Ratch, are you looking for books?" he asked. Relief washed over them. They hurried to him. "Butler Edward, it's so good to see you. Lord Dewey let us come to study magic books, but there are so many we don't know where to begin. Could you please show us?" Edward shook his head. "Not show you exactly. I only started learning magic a little earlier than you. When I first came here, I was just as lost. I figured it out slowly." He led them to a desk. "This is your first exposure to magic. You won't be able to handle the deep, advanced spells yet, and the deeper the magic, the more dangerous it is. One careless mistake can cause irreversible accidents. So start with the basics. Read Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, Magical Theory, The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection, and A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. If you're interested in potions, try Magical Drafts and Potions and 1,000 Magical Herbs and Fungi. But don't try potions on your own without guidance. It's very dangerous." The two mayors nodded eagerly. "We have no experience. We'll listen to you, Butler Edward." Edward relaxed. If they had insisted on learning powerful magic right away, he'd have been wary. Such people weren't worthy of the Lord's grace. He had spent over a month studying and found himself humbled by how profound magic was and how little he knew. He had grown both cautious and reverent toward the Lord's power. The Lord hadn't merely given them spell knowledge. He had transformed ordinary mortals into wizards. Even the quill that wrote constantly at the counter did so because the Lord was channeling his mastered knowledge and memories into it, producing new books and expanding the library. Edward composed himself and addressed the quill with respect. Lord Quill, we need to borrow Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, Magical Theory, The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection, and A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. Thank you. The quill paused, hovered to a nearby sheet of parchment, wrote the titles, then returned to the blank book and continued writing. From across the room, the shelves seemed to answer. Several magic books peeled themselves free, flapped their pages like wings, and flew to the table, stacking themselves neatly. Luke and Ratch watched, mouths open. Edward didn't reach for the pile. He drew his wand, cleared his throat, and in a voice that made them stare, tapped the books and intoned, Geminio. A white light surged into the books, and each instantly duplicated. The two mayors gasped and looked at Edward with something like awe. He felt a private pleasure. His practice had not been in vain. He duplicated the books again, then levitated the copies toward Luke and Ratch, forcing his smile down into something like professional seriousness. These books are very precious. Many are unique originals that can't leave the library, he said. So learn the duplication spell to make copies you can take home. Remember, duplicated books don't last forever. With my ability, they hold for at most a month, so absorb what you can in that time. After that, you'll need to duplicate them again. Each mayor hugged their books and nodded. They wanted to open them and start studying immediately, especially after seeing Edward perform magic, but they were still mayors with responsibilities. The Lord had rewarded their service by turning them into wizards. Abandoning their cities to study would betray that trust. Reluctantly, they carried their copies and wands to the fireplace and returned to their cities. Edward waved his wand and erased the titles from the parchment, leaving it blank. The books on the table closed, flapped their pages, and flew back to their places on the shelves. Satisfied, Edward turned and left the library, closing the door behind him. On Lord Dwyer's side, making Luke and Ratch into wizards was only the beginning. He envisioned not a handful of spellcasters, but an entire wizarding civilization in Middle-earth, like that of Britain, a society with its own culture and institutions. To do that, he needed numbers. The two cities together had over 30,000 residents. Add the Dunlendings from Isengard and the total topped 40,000. If all of them could be transformed, that would be enough to rebuild a wizarding world. But the practicalities were daunting. Turning an ordinary person into a wizard required rare potion ingredients and a barrel of dragon blood for each transformation. After the Battle of Isengard, Mordor and Dwyr had slain more than 50 wyverns and collected hundreds of barrels of dragon blood. Including the frost dragon's blood, the total reached nearly 1,000 barrels. Even so, that would only be enough to transform roughly 1,000 people. He could draw blood from the wyverns on the dragon farm, but doing so without depleting the resource meant only a small yield, enough for maybe 50 people at a time. Brewing individual potions for tens of thousands would be impossible. Faced with that bottleneck, Dwyr began to look for a different solution. He remembered legends from cultivation novels about a dragon transformation pool, an enchanted reservoir that, with the right rituals, could transform many at once. It was a fantasy, but perhaps he could adapt the idea into a magical dragon transformation pool of his own, an enchanted vat where ordinary people could enter and emerge as wizards. It would avoid the endless, laborious individual brews. The thought excited him. Dwyr felt a surge of impatience and eagerness to try. 306. Wizard Slots, Hogwarts Castle. Inside an independent, spacious chamber, a huge bathing pool filled nearly the entire floor. The pool was heptagonal. Its bottom and sides were cast in gold, then etched with runic symbols and magic circles in mithril. Mountains of potion ingredients fed themselves into the pool in orderly fashion. The water heated from the bottom and churned automatically, rotating both clockwise and counterclockwise. The whole construction resembled a giant cauldron sunk into the earth. Finally, barrels upon barrels of dragon blood were poured in until Dewey had exhausted his entire supply. As the dragon blood hit the surface, the pool erupted in violent reaction. The liquid boiled, radiating a heat like molten lava. The blood-red, scalding brew could have been mistaken for a pool of gore. This was the wizard transformation pool Dewey had spent more than half a year building. At heart, it was a giant alchemical cauldron. Dewey had inscribed his process for making bloodline fusion potions into it, so it could automatically produce the potions, accelerate their reactions in fusion, and stir them precisely. It could also accommodate 100 people at once for the bloodline fusion transformation. Dewey felt a surge of pride looking at his creation. His wizard training program could finally begin in earnest. He stepped out of the room and summoned his butler, Edward. "My lord, how may I serve you?" Edward asked respectfully. After more than half a year of diligent study, Edward's magical knowledge had reached the level of a third or fourth year student at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. He'd begun mastering intermediate and even advanced spells. He was no longer a novice. Since acquiring magic, Edward had become even more capable in managing the castle. Dewey had grown confident enough to entrust him with the herb garden, the Ashwinder room, and the giant spider room. For example, the mandrakes in the herb garden were deadly with their cries. Non-magical people could not safely enter. Dewey had mostly handled them himself before, but now he handed that responsibility to butler Edward. Dangerous tasks that used to be reserved for Dewey were now delegated. Dewey had become a hands-off master. Satisfied, Dewey instructed him, "Go now and organize the loyal and capable citizens within our territory. Choose 500 people and bring them to the castle. I will give them a chance to gain magical ability." "Of course," Dewey added bluntly, "you must tell them up front about the pain involved in the transformation. If they cannot endure it, or if their will is weak, they should not take this opportunity. They could die." Dewey was not exaggerating. The transformation demanded a clear, steady will throughout. The excruciating pain of tendons being pulled and bones being reshaped could leave those with weak minds in a coma, mentally dulled, or, if they lost control of their magic, explode and die. The only ones who had succeeded so far did so because of iron wills. Not just Butler Edward and Mayor Luke, even Mayor Ratch of Bree, who seemed the least resolute but was driven by greed and advice, had endured it. When he jumped into the cauldron, his screams echoed through the castle, and his vitality proved even stronger than Luke's, who endured beside him. Edward went from stunned to ecstatic on hearing Dewey's plan. The Lord was going to cultivate another 500 wizards? The thought of Weathertop's future army of wand-wielding wizards thrilled him. "Yes, my lord. I will select 500 of the most loyal and capable citizens," he promised solemnly. He intended to contact the two mayors and painstakingly select candidates, but loyalty to the Lord would be the foremost criterion. No one with ill intent would be allowed to join. Seeming to anticipate this, Dewey handed him a glass-like spinning top. "This is a scrying mirror," he explained. "If there are suspicious people nearby, it will glow, spin, and chirp. The closer it is to someone dangerous, the brighter and louder it becomes. Use it to screen our applicants." Edward caught the device carefully. Hearing Dewey's explanation, his eyes lit up. "Thank you, my lord." A tool that detected suspicious minds was precious, and the Lord had just given it to him. Dewey waved it off as a casual, alchemical gadget inspired by legitimacy. Even a trace of malice would set off the alarm. The device had been made after previous threats. Gollum, the Ringwraiths, Saruman, and others had approached the castle. He'd produced a batch of these scrying mirrors and positioned them throughout the castle and Weathertop. Any trespass would trigger an alarm. Giving Edward one now was also meant to prevent disloyal individuals from mixing among the chosen. Most citizens of his two towns had come from across Eriador seeking refuge. Dewey could not guarantee everyone's devotion. When choosing new wizards, he had to pick those truly loyal to him. Those who merely sought protection would be allowed to remain ordinary citizens so long as they obeyed the law. People's hearts differ. He could not force loyalty, but the chance to become a wizard would be reserved for the faithful. Hogsmeade and Bree Edward immediately contacted the two mayors, Luke and Ratch. Both were astonished to hear the Lord intended to cultivate 500 wizards, and both quickly began organizing candidate selections, each eager to secure as many wizard slots as possible for their own town. A new round of rivalry between them had begun. After more than half a year, Both mayors had shed their novice status and become wizards in their own right. Mayor Ratch of Bree, vain as ever, never let go of his wand. He loved publicly displaying the 10 1/4-inch cedar wand with a dragon heartstring core Dewey had given him, showing off small charms and basking in his townsfolk's impressed reactions. Mayor Luke of Hogsmeade was more low-key, but took equal pride in the 12-inch fir wand with a dragon heartstring core Dewey had made for him. Outside of official duties, he practiced spells in his office and delighted children by demonstrating impressive effects on request. News that both mayors could now use magic spread quickly once they returned to their towns. Envy and curiosity followed, and the announcement of the 500 wizard selection, posted on both towns' bulletin boards, caused an uproar. Everyone was stunned and seized with desire. Who would refuse an opportunity to possess magic? Everyone wanted the Lord's favor and to rise overnight. The sign-up sheets filled immediately with eager applicants. 307. Assessment. After consulting with the two mayors, Steward Edward agreed not to bar anyone from signing up. Still, several levels of assessment were set up, testing courage, willpower, and loyalty to screen the final candidates. Because Edward possessed the highest level of magic among them, he erected a wall of fire in the central square of each city. The rule was simple. Only those who passed through the wall of fire could proceed to the next stage. When the flames flared up, people tried to test them. Someone thrust a wooden stick toward the fire and watched in horror as the exposed end instantaneously turned to ash. The crowd inhaled as one. This was real fire, not an illusion. Almost half the gathered folk backed away at once. Most of them were ordinary townspeople with little ambition. They had come for the spectacle, clinging to the faint hope of a chance. Faced with a literal wall of flame, they lost their nerve. Where some retreated, others stepped forward. In Bree City, the militia captain who had led the defense against the corpse demon was the first to walk into the flame, earning a ripple of gasps. Beyond the wall of fire, there was another chamber, invisible to those outside, so the onlookers could not see what became of him. Once one person tried it, however, others grew bolder. Several militiamen who had faced the corpse demon before shut their eyes, gritted their teeth, and charged into the fire. They vanished from sight without a cry. Someone in the crowd, shrewd and quick to judge, took the lack of screams as proof the flames might be an illusion. He strutted up to the wall with the air of a man who had seen through a trick. When he reached the edge, he even felt the heat against his skin and began to doubt his own conclusion. "No, it's fake," he told himself, forcing the thought, then hurled himself forward. A second later, a tongue of flame shot out and singed a tuft of his hair. The burning smell and sudden sting sent him stumbling backward, scrambling across the ground as if from a wild beast. The sight drew nervous laughter from some and fresh caution from others. After all, even the mayor had not promised the wall would not kill someone if they misjudged it. Behind the wall of fire, Mayor Lockie stood beside Steward Edward. A handful of people who had already passed through waited with them, faces still pale from the ordeal. Lockie peered at the scorched hair of the shaken man and asked, curious, "Edward, what is the nature of this wall of fire? Those who pass through are unharmed, but that fellow's hair is burned off." Those close enough leaned in to hear. Edward smiled, a little smug. "This is an improved version of the fire charm," he said. "Lord Dewyer taught it to me. It's a test of courage. If a person has the nerve to rush straight through, they will feel the heat but not be harmed. But if someone hesitates, if fear makes them falter, the flames will feel just like ordinary fire, and they will suffer as if burned." Mayor Ratch, standing nearby, pursued the thought aloud. "But will it do real damage?" Edward waved his hand dismissively. "No need to worry. The effect is temporary. Once they pass out of the flames, the pain fades quickly. It won't cause serious burns. At worst, it singes hair from the body." Ratch relaxed visibly, and a ripple of envy ran through him. Being the Lord's steward had its advantages. Edward had constant access to the Lord and his arcane knowledge. He had been taught spells no ordinary city official would ever see. Sensing the mayor's reaction, Edward added generously, "Mayor Ratch, if you're interested, I'll teach you this charm after the assessment." Ratch's eyes lit up. "You would? Is that permitted?" "Of course," Edward said. Lord Dwyer shared this charm freely. Magic advances through exchange and discussion. Consider it mutual learning. Ratch felt a mix of shame and admiration. He remembered his first reaction when the Lord announced plans to cultivate 500 wizards. His own prestige as Bree City's wizard master would be diluted. He had fretted that his unique status would be diminished. Yet the Lord's command was absolute, and Ratch had dutifully cooperated, trying, at the same time, to secure as many wizard slots for Bree as possible. If he could place more candidates under his influence, he might blunt the loss to his standing and gain the upper hand over his old rival, Luke. With that thought, he scanned the crowd beyond the flames, hoping many would pass the test and earn Bree additional wizard slots. Perhaps he could even shape the city into a true city of wizards. Outside the flames, among tens of thousands, there were plenty of brave souls. Most were militiamen, others were young townsfolk, and a few determined women. They gritted their teeth and charged. Some emerged on the far side unscathed and qualified for the next stage. Others collapsed in agony, screaming as if their skin were aflame, and tumbled back out, ruined by fear. Although no lasting burns marred their skin once they stepped clear, the memory of searing pain stuck with them and turned many away from trying again. Age proved decisive for many. Most of those who dared were young. Older citizens were comforted by the status quo and less willing to risk themselves. Not every elder hesitated, though. Buttercup, owner of the Prancing Pony, marched through like a seasoned campaigner and stepped out smiling, greeting Mayor Ratch with a hearty nod. The Wall of Fire test ran the whole day. By evening, more than 1,000 people had passed, while over 90% had been eliminated. The next morning, those 1,000-plus successful candidates came forward for the second round. 308, final round of assessment. The second assessment tested willpower. Edward led the more than 1,000 candidates who had passed the first round into an empty chamber. Under confused, nervous stares, he produced a bottle of dark purple potion and smashed it on the floor. The glass shattered and the liquid, under a magic ward, rose into a purple mist that quickly filled the room. Everyone was unprepared and inhaled the vapors. Some clapped hands over mouth and nose, but even where the mist did not enter through breathing, it seeped through exposed skin. One by one, the candidates sank into vivid illusions and forgot they were under assessment. They felt transported to the castle, plunged into a huge cauldron for the wizard transformation. A scalding, lava-red brew burned them alive. Their bodies seemed to melt and their organs seared. The pain was unbearable, and many screamed. The Lord had warned them, endure, and you could become a wizard. Many could not withstand it, scrambling to escape the cauldron or collapsing into unconsciousness. Those who broke and fled from the vision regained awareness the next instant. The agonizing sensation evaporated as if it had been a dream. Assessment failed. You may leave, Edward announced in a cold, level voice to the recovering candidates. Reluctant or not, the failed ones could only file out of the room. Dejected, only a fraction remained trapped in the illusion. Butler Edward and Mayor Lockie stood in the chamber as well, both protected by a precast ward. Lockie watched the writhing faces and asked, curiosity edged with concern, "Mr. Edward, what potion was that? Did Lord Dwyer supply it?" Edward shook his head with a hint of satisfaction. "I brewed it myself. Lord Dwyer gave guidance, of course. It's a confusion potion made for this assessment, to let people experience what we went through when we became wizards." Lockie felt sympathy for a beat. The memory of his own transformation still chilled him. He had no desire to undergo it again. Was it cruel to subject these hopefuls to that pain? Wouldn't it leave lasting trauma? Edward anticipated the thought. No need to worry. The confusion potion has no lasting effects. When they wake, it will fade like a dream. They won't remember the pain. Relieved, Lockie watched as the mist dispersed. In the end, only 240 people passed the second round. He was not pleased. This was only the second test, and to be left with so few would make it harder for his city to claim many wizard slots later. He had hoped to secure more places for Bree City, but the selection was Edward's to run, and Edward showed no favoritism. Without pause, Edward began the third assessment. This time, he didn't stage another trial. Instead, he produced a small glass device and walked slowly past the first row of candidates. Confused murmurs spread through the room. Stopping before one man, Edward held the glass up and said expressionlessly, "You, eliminated." The man stood stunned, anger and disbelief flickering on his face, but he dared not argue with Butler to the Lord. He left the queue, head bowed. Lockie's anxiety flared. Every Bree citizen eliminated meant Hogsmeade could gain ground. He caught at Edward's sleeve. "What is this third round? How can Hal be cut without doing anything? He's a fine young man from Bree." Edward glanced at Lockie, then at the gathered candidates. "This round tests loyalty," he said. "This is Lord Dewey's scrying mirror. It discerns the heart. Only those most loyal to the Lord may pass and take a place as a wizard." Hearing that, the crowd grew tense. Lockie fell silent. Who would dispute loyalty as a criterion? The man by the door shrank back, guilty now, and hurried away. Not all who served Dewey were true adherents. Many were simply self-interested, seeking the protection of the strong. In a dire hour, such people would scatter rather than fight. That was survival, not treachery, but it disqualified them here. Edward proceeded down the line, holding the scrying mirror before each candidate. Each person watched with bated breath, afraid their latent disloyalty would be revealed. The mirror's glow varied. Some lights were faint, almost imperceptible. Others flared brightly. For this tool, brightness meant detection. If the mirror emitted any light, Edward eliminated the holder without hesitation. As Dewey's most steadfast butler, Edward tolerated no hint of wavering among those who would receive the Lord's favor. The numbers dwindled, and Mayor Lockie's expression grew more troubled. When Edward stopped in front of a middle-aged man, the scrying mirror flared so intensely it began to spin and emitted a high, piercing shriek. Edward's usually composed eyes went cold, a sharp glint flashing through them. 309, number of wizards. Everyone else turned, surprised and curious at the sound coming from the scrying mirror. When the middle-aged man saw the commotion, his expression changed, and he bolted for the doorway. He barely took a few steps before Edward stopped him with a perfectly cast Petrificus Totalis. The man froze, terror etched on his face. Edward sneered and then turned to Mayor Lockie. "This man harbors ill intentions and is highly suspicious. I'll leave him to you, Mayor Lockie, for questioning." All right." Lockie, taken aback, nodded quickly. He knew that when the scrying mirror flagged someone, it usually only emitted a bright light. But the mirror's frantic, blinding alarm for this man indicated something far worse. Malice so strong it triggered a severe warning. It was alarming that someone like this would appear in Bree and have passed the first 2 rounds. As mayor of Bree City, Lockie had to handle it. He ignored the ongoing assessment for the moment, drew his wand, conjured chains to bind the man, and floated him out of the room to hand over to the militia for detention and interrogation. By the time Lockie finished and returned, the assessment had just ended. No one else among the remaining candidates had triggered the mirror the way that man had. But Lockie felt even more dismayed when he saw how few had passed. Of the original 240 people, only 122 remained after the 3rd round. Nearly half had been cut. Out of the 500 wizard slots, Bree City had claimed only 122. The gap was enormous. Lockie could already imagine how Luke would taunt him. He could only hope Hogsmeade's numbers wouldn't be equally poor, or how would he face the Lord? Edward declined Lockie's invitation to stay and moved through the fireplace to Hogsmeade to hold the 3 assessments there. The 122 who had passed in Bree were told they had secured a wizard slot and would be called to the castle on a chosen day to receive their magical abilities. Many of them were militiamen. Among the others were elders like Buttercup, owner of the Prancing Pony, and more than a dozen women and young girls. Those dozen or so women drew particular attention. On the Middle-earth continent, especially in human society, women's status was low, similar to medieval customs, and for these women to stand out among tens of thousands in Bree to become part of the final 122 marked them for special notice. Lockie treated everyone who passed with equal respect. Though they were ordinary now, they would soon be wizards, and he had to take them seriously. In Hogsmeade, Edward ran the same 3 trials. Located at the foot of Weathertop and closer to the castle and the Lord, Hogsmeade's residents saw magic more often and longed for it more fiercely than Bree's. The turnout and fervor were greater. In the first round, the trial of the Wall of Fire, nearly 3,000 people passed, double Bree's number. In the second, the trial of willpower, over 500 passed. In the third, the test of loyalty, 287 passed. Mayor Luke, who already knew Bree's numbers, laughed out loud with delight when he saw his city had more than twice the successful candidates, and that his own daughter was among them. Hogsmeade had taken the lion's share. The two cities together produced 409 candidates, still 91 short of the 500 slots. But Dewey also commanded the Dunlanders of Isengard. Following Dewey's orders, Edward traveled to Isengard and ran the 3 trials there. 131 Dunlanders passed, bringing the total to 540, exceeding the quota. Edward reported back to Dewey. Dewey did not mind the surplus. He was pleased with Edward's selections. After 3 rounds of screening, those left were elites, not only brave and strong-willed, but fiercely loyal. After transformation, they would be wizards loyal to him. He ordered all who had passed to be gathered and brought to the castle for bloodline fusion and transformation into wizards. As for the surplus and the limited supply of dragon blood, Dewey was unconcerned. The blood of one frost dragon had not been fully used, and if that proved insufficient, he could draw from the wyverns at the dragon farm and give them blood-replenishing potions. He was even considering using other wyvern parts, dragon meat, for example, as a substitute. Though not as potent as true dragon blood, quantity could make up for it. In any case, he had more dragon corpses than he could ever use. When the 500-plus candidates gathered at Hogwarts Castle, Dewey took charge of the men and entrusted the women to Arwen. Following the principle of ladies first, Arwen led the women to the witch transformation pool for dragon blood fusion. Nearly 100 women from Bree, Hogsmeade, and Isengard had passed the 3 rounds. Standing before the Lord's wife, they could hardly feel jealousy. Arwen's presence was gentle and kind. She treated everyone equally, radiating a soft, reassuring light that put them at ease. Under Arwen's guidance, they shed their fear, removed their clothes, and stepped into the scalding, churning blood pool. They had felt the pain once before in a hallucination during the assessment, but this was real. The magma-like potion seared their flesh, wrenching tendons and marrow in agony that made them wish for death. Still, they clenched their teeth and endured, choosing pain over surrender. Many of these women had already endured countless hardships. Their willpower was iron, stronger than that of many men. They clung to this chance. If they became noble witches, they could escape oppression and hardship and learn wondrous magic. Arwen stood by the pool, feeling their resolve, deeply moved. Her body glowed with a soft light like moon and stars, as if she prayed or recited an ancient elven spell. May the Valar grant blessings and dispel illness. Bathed in that light, the women's pain receded. Their agonized expressions softened, and eyes closed, they seemed to sleep. Thick blood coons formed around them, a chrysalis of rebirth. Time passed in silence. Arwen watched without impatience, compassionately waiting for the cocoons to break. At last, the cocoons split, and the women emerged, struggling free. They were transformed, new in body and spirit. They had become witches. After the women completed their transformation, the newly awakened witches slowly adapted to their altered bodies under Arwen's guidance. Arwen prepared to teach them personally how to learn and control their magic. Dewey, meanwhile, was allowing the men to enter the blood pool in turns to fuse with dragon blood and gain magical ability. There weren't enough dragon blood reserves for everyone at once, so Dewey singled out the most outstanding and loyal 100 men and set them aside for the next round. Once the first group had absorbed their wyvern blood and completed their fusions, Dewey cleaned and enlarged the cauldron pool to prepare a new bloodline fusion potion for the remaining recruits. With no wyvern blood left, he opted for frost dragon blood. The frost dragon was an ancient dragon, its magic potentia far greater than a wyvern's, so whereas 1 barrel of ordinary dragon blood was needed per person, 1 barrel of frost dragon blood could transform 10. Dewey had collected hundreds of barrels. He poured 10 barrels into the pool. Where the earlier potion had looked like scalding magma, this one turned ice blue and radiated an intense cold. The room chilled, as if winter had arrived. The pool didn't freeze over, but a biting cold rose from it. Everyone who saw it suspected that jumping in would turn them into statues. Chief Brog of the Black Wildlings stepped forward without hesitation and dived into the pool. In an instant, he felt himself seize up, his thoughts thickened and slowed, and the cold bit into his bones and soul until he couldn't utter a sound. The men Dewey had chosen for their courage, will, and loyalty followed him, one after another. The dragon blood and cold worked through their bodies, numbing and stiffening them, ice seeming to crawl along their veins and clutch their hearts. Their brains slowed, but the pain was sharp and relentless, like being skinned with 1,000 ice blades or pierced by countless needles. It was no less agonizing than the first group's experience, perhaps more so. But the payoff matched the suffering. When the frost dragon blood had been fully absorbed, the ice shells around them shattered. Their physiques had changed. A faint ice blue tinge had crept into their irises, and a cool aura radiated from their skin. They stared at one another in stunned delight. Brog, whose aptitude had proven exceptional, already felt the magic stirring in him. He dabbed a fingertip into the pool water, and a thin bloom of ice formed on the surface. Dewey watched, impressed. Brog had grasped an aspect of his gift almost immediately. He was clearly a prodigy. When all 540 people had finished transforming, Dewey cleared the remaining potion and residue from the pool and led everyone back to the banquet hall. He felt a headache coming. Even with his skill, he could not hope to craft wands for so many people alone. A wand is a wizard's primary casting tool. Without a proper wand, a wizard struggles to channel magic accurately or powerfully. Whoever mastered wand making would be the kingdom's arms manufacturer for magic. Dewey could not cede that responsibility lightly. He needed to find someone with a natural aptitude for wandcraft, bind them to him with magical oaths and contracts, and train them as a dedicated wand maker who would never betray him. He announced he would select one person from the new wizards to learn wandcraft. The news electrified the room. Everyone had seen the fine wands carried by the lord, the butler, and the mayor. They knew how crucial those instruments were. Learning to make wands would not only give the maker their own wand, it would make them indispensable to Dewey. But Dewey did not pick at once. Wand making required talent. He intended to test them practically. He conjured a pile of wood and basic wand-making tools and began teaching the fundamentals, carving and polishing the shaft, while keeping the essential secrets of wand cores to himself. As long as he held the core techniques, no one could produce a truly effective wand, even if they knew the right materials, let alone match the quality of an Ollivander-level craftsman. After the brief demonstration, everyone set to work with knives and wood, eager to impress. Even Butler Edward joined with Dewey's permission. It quickly became clear that talent varied. Some recruits fumbled so badly they couldn't even hold the wood steady. Their attempts were clumsy and awkward. Dewey shook his head at the strange, misshapen efforts. Rotten wood cannot be carved, he thought. Those men put down their tools and bowed out. Edward wasn't exceptional, but he was competent. Dewey nodded at him with approval. Then his attention was drawn to a young man in his early 20s, red-haired and freckled, hands steady as the carving knife danced. The wood was becoming a proper wand, with clean lines and pleasing proportions. Dewey picked up the crude wand and examined it, feeling genuine appreciation. He looked up and asked gently, "Young man, what is your name?" The youth's voice wavered. "Bill, sir. Bill." "Don't be nervous," Dewey reassured him with a smile. "You handle wood well. Are you a carpenter?" Bill shook his head, excitement and nerves mingling. "No, sir, I'm a militiaman in Hogsmeade, but my father is a carpenter. I learned wood carving from him." Dewey turned the piece in his hands and nodded. "You have craft and a knack for wand making. Would you be willing to study under me?" Under the envious eyes of everyone else, Bill's answer came quick and eager. "Yes, sir, I'm willing." "Good," Dewey said. "You'll stay at the castle and learn wand making from me. When you can craft a wand of your own, you'll be my wand maker. You'll be responsible for making wands for everyone here. Can you do that?" "I can," Bill said, voice firm with determination. 311. Magic Apprentice. Jealousy of Bill quickly turned to anxiety and impatience. The Lord had announced that Bill would make their wands, so everyone prayed he would learn quickly and supply wands as soon as possible. Shortly afterward, witnessed by Arwen, Dewey and Bill signed a magical contract. Bill would become Hogwarts' exclusive wand maker, responsible for producing the wands that Dewey would distribute to the many wizards. In effect, Bill was the weapons manufacturer Dewey had chosen and trained. They even talked of one day opening the only wand shop in Middle-earth, a sort of Ollivanders for their world. Bill stayed at the castle to study wand-making under Dewey. Dewey allowed the other new wizards to remain there as well. Even without personal wands, they could begin learning magical theory. Dewey set up a large classroom, hung his portrait on the blackboard, and provided copies of many first-year textbooks from Hogwarts. The newcomers devoured the material eagerly. Study kept them from boredom, even without a wand. To give them some practical experience, Dewey placed a single wand on the podium and let each novice try it in turn. The wand became the most coveted object in the castle. People queued all day for a single chance to cast a spell. Success or failure, everyone only got one attempt. Those who succeeded, sometimes on as simple a spell as Lumos, were ecstatic. Those who failed put the wand down dejectedly and dove back into their studies, waiting for another turn. A few of the newcomers showed remarkable innate talent. Brog, leader of the Black Barbarian land, could already perform a few minor feats without a wand, condensing water into ice, exhaling a veil of mist. The area of effect was small, but enough to make others envious. While teaching Bill, Dewey also made a wand for Brog. After all, Brog answered to Dewey as well. Dewey could not show favoritism between the leaders, so Brog's wand was crafted with an aspen shaft and a thunderbird feather core. Dewey was pleasantly surprised that Brog was compatible with it. He had assumed, because many of the newcomers shared dragon blood, that dragon heartstring would be the most suitable core. He had worried about a shortage. The dead wyverns and frost dragons, they had amounted to barely 50 beasts, while more than 500 people awaited wands. Even dividing heartstrings into sections might not be enough. Brog's successful match with Thunderbird Feather eased that concern. The wand proved extraordinarily fast and powerful in combat, lightning quick in spellwork, and Brog cherished it as if afraid to lose it. Bill himself progressed rapidly. His background in woodcarving let him turn complete wand shafts in a few months. He learned to engrave and construct the internal magical circuitry as well. Now he was studying wand woods and cores in depth because a competent wand maker must know every material and how to combine them for the best effect. To teach him, Dewey took Bill into the old forest to shear the wool of the horns. With Dewey's strength, the horns no longer posed a real threat. When they tried to attack, Dewey froze the surrounding trees, broke off a branch from each, and explained the properties of each wood and which kinds of wizards they suited. Bill watched his teacher with awe. Any of those trees could have crushed him, yet Dewey moved through the forest as if unchallenged, casually stilling the Huorns with a flick of his hand. From then on, Bill called him teacher instead of lord. Dewey accepted the change, and Bill became his first official student. As more branches were taken, the Huorns seemed to accept it. After realizing they could not harm the two, they fell silent, their limbs stilled like ordinary trees. To the Huorns, losing a few branches was no more significant than a human losing hair. To a wand maker, those pieces were treasure. Bill could hardly contain his excitement. "This place is a treasure trove, a paradise for wand makers," he said. "With the old forest, we won't lack materials." The Huorn wood had unique magical properties, and the forest's proximity to Weathertop made it practical. Dewey warned Bill that the trees did have temperaments. Next time, Bill would have to come gather wood on his own, and he'd better learn some defensive magic, or he might be the one to suffer. Bill shuddered at the memory of the Huorn's earlier frenzy and resolved to study harder once he had his own wand. After nearly shearing all the largest suitable trees, Dewey and Bill returned to Hogwarts with enough material for thousands of wands. Having taught most of the wand-making knowledge, Dewey gradually stepped back and let Bill practice independently. Bill processed the old forest branches into rough wand forms and paired them with core materials Dewey had screened: dragon heartstring, thunderbird feathers, giant eagle feathers, elf hair, giant spider nerves, and troll heartstrings. Of these, dragon heartstring, giant eagle feather, elf hair, and thunderbird feather were the top choices. Dewey explained the differences. Dragon Heartstring produced the most powerful and reactive wands, capable of explosive magic. Giant Eagle Feather cores were fiercely loyal, excellent for powerful and creative spells. Elf Hair gave the most consistent, stable results and resisted the dark arts. Thunderbird Feather cores offered extraordinary adaptability, blistering casting speed, and massive power. Dewey combined these primary cores with many kinds of wood to craft a variety of wands, and Bill adopted the same philosophy for the novices who still lacked wands. Wand making was not easy. Bill failed often at first. A small mountain of discarded wands grew in his workshop. While he worked through his mistakes, Dewey was busy with another project. He felled a malong tree branch as thick as a bucket, sliced it into planks, and, after careful processing, fashioned 2 solid wooden wardrobes. This time, Dewey intended to build something much more ambitious, a vanishing cabinet for the magical world, a long-distance teleportation device that could ignore distance and anti-magic wards. As a means of long-distance teleportation, a vanishing cabinet can cover greater distances than apparition and, in a sense, is not limited by distance at all. It is also more stable than a portkey. Portkeys can reach farther than apparition, but they cannot transport large numbers of people or very heavy cargo at once. They require creation in advance, too. A fireplace needs to be connected to the flue network, and flue powder must be available for targeted travel. The vanishing cabinet's chief advantage is that 2 linked cabinets can continuously move people between them without any practical limit on numbers. With vanishing cabinets, large groups can be gathered and moved quickly. Dewey planned to reproduce a vanishing cabinet, learn its magic thoroughly, and then expand on it. His idea was to set up vanishing cabinets between Bree and Hogsmeade, and even to Isengard, knitting those places into a single, instantly reachable network. That way, orders or reinforcements could be sent immediately, or an evacuation could be mounted without the day-long journeys that now separated even Bree and Hogsmeade, let alone Isengard 1,000 miles away. He also thought about the flue network. Because flue powder was scarce, the network could not be widely popularized among his people the way it is in the wider magical world. Production had always been in Dewey's hands. He had once been the only one making it. Now, with a group of wizards under him, he considered selecting craftsmen to establish a magic factory dedicated to producing flue powder. With greater output, public fireplaces could be installed in Bree, Hogsmeade, Isengard, and elsewhere. Flue powder could be sold, and citizens across his territory could use the network. But first, he needed a vanishing cabinet. He cut a branch as thick as a bucket from a malong tree, just an insignificant offshoot on an otherwise towering tree. He worked the branch into planks, cutting, sanding, measuring, polishing. Then he drew a mithril carving knife and etched mysterious patterns and runes into every plank with meticulous care. A week passed by the time the carving was finished. Like a carpenter, Dewey assembled the planks into a wooden cabinet nearly 3 meters tall, an obelisk of sorts. The malong bark was silver gray. The heartwood inside was a burnished gold, as bright as metal. The design was simple, but the golden wood and the runes made it feel luxurious. When he had finished the first cabinet, he used the remaining wood to fashion an identical second one. At that point, the pair was only semi-finished and still unusable. Dewey set to work filling their interiors with dense runic script, drawing line after line in mithril until thousands of runes linked together into a magical pattern like an arcane array. By the time both cabinets were covered, another month had gone by. Looking at the 2 towers of wood, Dewey understood why vanishing cabinets commanded such a price in the magical world. Their construction was complex, costly, and, without the old techniques at hand, painfully slow. When the array work was done, he placed the cabinets back to back. Standing before one door, he slipped his wand into the lock, spoke an arcane formula, and poured magic into the wood. The runes ignited one by one, and the cabinet filled with a deep, peculiar aura, as if some secret lay trapped inside. He repeated the process at the other cabinet. As the second set of runes glowed, a connection formed between them, like 2 faces of the same coin, each reflecting the other's magical signature. Dewey opened the double doors. Inside was a perfect, impenetrable blackness. The runes he had drawn seemed to vanish, and although from the outside the cabinets looked less than a meter deep, The back panel had become a bottomless, lightless passage that swallowed even his wand light. The darkness could not be banished. It drank any light as if it were a hole in the world. He smiled. The cabinets had taken. He did not step in himself right away. Instead, he summoned a small snake and with a parcel-tongue command, sent it slithering into one cabinet. The snake disappeared into the black and a heartbeat later wriggled out of the other cabinet. Confirming that the teleportation worked, Dewey ran several more trials. He was not willing to risk being sent somewhere off course or into chaotic spatial turbulence. Satisfied, he climbed into one cabinet. For an instant, he was plunged into absolute dark and silence. He felt as if some dark thing had swallowed him whole. Then, before any real disquiet could take hold, light and sound returned. He blinked and stepped out of the other cabinet, right in front of its door. The sensation was nothing like apparition or a portkey. There was none of the crushing, queasy feeling of being forced through a tight tube. It was simply a moment of blackness, and then the other side, like walking through a doorway. Dewey detected no ripples of magical fluctuation. The experience reminded him of passing through platform 9 3/4, a stretch of darkness and then arrival elsewhere, and he suspected those platforms used the same principles. The success made Dewey reassess the place of the vanishing cabinet among modes of travel. In the wider magical world, vanishing cabinets had fallen out of favor because flue powder was cheap and widespread. Apparitions serviced short trips, and portkeys handled long-distance travel. Compared to those, a cabinet was costly and complicated to build. But cabinets had strengths the others did not: comfort, stability, and the ability to move many people quickly. They were uniquely useful for mass transport. Dewey decided to use that strength. He left one cabinet in the castle and carried the other to Hildorian in the Far East. Hildorian, the cradle of mankind, was a paradise touched by Iluvatar's blessing. Dewey treated it as his private garden and final refuge. Portkeys could reach it, but they were bound by time and convenience. A vanishing cabinet made travel between Weathertop and Hildorian as effortless as visiting a neighbor. 313. City Teleportation. After creating the first pair of vanishing cabinets, Dewey was not satisfied. The cabinets had been made of wood and were therefore easily damaged. Even a single scratch could make the teleportation function malfunction or fail entirely. He began to consider harder materials to replace the wood. Metal was the obvious choice, but ordinary metals lacked the necessary magical conductivity. The original cabinets had required special, magically attuned wood. Common timber would not work. The only metal with the required magical properties was mithril. Dewey happened to have mithril in abundance. He owned a tenth of the Moria mines, and every year Balin sent his share of mithril to him. Ores were piled in the treasury, kept as a cushion for smog, and the mother of mithril that Dewey had buried in the belly of Weathertop Mountain was slowly radiating out and transmuting nearby iron ore into more mithril. Output was small but steady. So under Smog's mournful gaze, Dewey hauled a pile of mithril ore to the furnace, smelted it, cast the pieces into the shape of a vanishing cabinet, and inscribed runes across the metal. Dewey had also studied the improved principles behind the two-way mirror and found the cabinet's one-to-one limitation wasteful. He spent several months refining the design and produced a new kind of vanishing cabinet, 6 in total. Forged from mithril, they were extraordinarily durable and far less prone to failure. Their teleportation was stable, and Dewey added a rotating dial to each door. Around the dial were colored segments labeled with destination names: Rivendell, Lothlorien, Isengard, and so on. By turning the dial to a name, a cabinet would link to the cabinet matching that name, allowing any one cabinet to connect to any of the others. Dewey sent cabinets to Rivendell, Lothlorien, Isengard, Bree, and Hogsmeade. He kept the 6th inside the castle. Elrond of Rivendell and Galadriel and Celeborn of Lothlorien were amazed and grateful. They recognized the cabinets as strategic assets, an emergency means to evacuate many people quickly. In Bree, Hogsmeade, and Isengard, Dewey placed the cabinets in public squares to serve as public teleporters. Residents of Bree could travel to Hogsmeade, Hogsmeade residents could go to Bree, and the Black Wildlings of Isengard could travel to either town. The cabinets immediately strengthened ties between the three places. Use of the cabinets was not free. Ordinary people paid a modest fee within their means, but merchants were charged according to the value of the goods they transported. Dewey left the administration of fees to the two mayors and chief blog of the Black Wildlings. The three would discuss and set prices. Dewey, with his considerable wealth, wasn't interested in these small sums, but he did not want his subjects to grow accustomed to getting everything for nothing. Excessive generosity could breed entitlement. The residents accepted the arrangement without objection. After all, Dewey had given them a miraculous way to bypass long journeys and arrive instantly elsewhere. Excited to try the cabinets, people crowded the market squares with coins in hand, forming long lines. Merchants, especially, were delighted. Previously, they had faced long, arduous journeys to move goods and constant risk from bandits. Now they could save time and danger. Merchants moved wares from Bree to Hogsmeade and returned with Hogsmeade's agricultural produce and handicrafts. The Isengard cabinet, placed in the Black Wildlings' tribal grounds rather than inside Orthanc, saw just as much traffic. Clever traders used the cabinets in Bree and Hogsmeade to funnel goods to Isengard for trade with the Wildlings or to sell on in nearby Rohan and Gondor. The Black Wildlings, for their part, moved cattle, sheep, and horses to Bree and Hogsmeade to sell via the cabinets. Traveling merchants from farther afield also began using the cabinets to shorten risky journeys. Traders who formerly traveled the north-south road between Eriador and southern Rohan and Gondor were willing to pay higher fees. A southern merchant selling in Eriador had once faced a month-long trip and the constant danger of bandits. Now, with the vanishing cabinets, those risks vanished. Many merchants brought large quantities of goods to Isengard, teleported them to Bree and Hogsmeade, and then returned south to sell. For a time, Bree and Hogsmeade prospered even more. The Black Wildlings tribe flourished as well. They earned fees and launched businesses selling livestock products to Eriador. The three regions under Dewey's influence buzzed with new activity. Hogwarts Castle, too, became lively. Bill, who had been instructed by Dewey in wand-crafting techniques, not only completed his own wand, but also made wands for more than 500 others. Wizards who had longed for their first wands were overjoyed and eager to begin practicing. For half a year, they had studied magical theory within the castle, receiving guidance from Dewey's portrait as well as instruction from Arwen and Dewey himself. Except for lacking a wand, they were no longer novices ignorant of magic. 314. Crash Course in Magic. Once they received wands that suited them, nobody could wait to try every kind of magic. Previously, with only a single communal wand, they had to take turns. Often you waited days for your turn and could only practice once. Many had simply grabbed a wand-sized twig and waved it around to rehearse. Now, with proper wands in hand, most spells worked on the very first try. Some sent out balls of light, others levitated leaves, a cluster of flame here, a match transformed into a needle there. Each person had a different knack. Some loved lumos, others excelled at fire charms, a few showed talent for transfiguration, and several were gifted at herbology. One had even brewed a basic potion during the 6 wandless months, proving aptitude for potions. Dewey watched them with shining eyes. After more than half a year, he knew every one of these new wizards well. Now that they had wands, he stopped letting them teach themselves and set up a magic crash course to turn 500 people into his own corps of wizards. Besides Bill, who would teach wandcraft, Dewey selected others to teach broom making and flue powder brewing, and to train potions masters, alchemists, and herbology experts. Perhaps husband and wife think alike. Arwen, while training her witches, chose a woman skilled at weaving to pass on magical loom work. One day Hogsmeade might boast its very own Madame Malkin's robes. The announcement that the Lord would open a crash course thrilled everyone. Only after learning a little magic did they realize how profound the castle's power was. Ever-burning Gubrathian fire, a ceiling synchronized with the outside sky, floating candles, living portraits, shifting staircases, patrolling suits of armor, phenomena still far beyond their grasp. Not to mention the storm-summoning Thunderbird, the giant octopus in the Black Lake, the rumored dragon guarding a vault, and the basilisk in the chamber, each legendary enough to inspire awe and curiosity. So when the Lord himself would teach, every student burned with eagerness. 500 or so students rivaled the role at Hogwarts. To house them, Dewey enlarged the classroom with the undetectable extension charm. A crash course couldn't copy Hogwarts' 7-year curriculum, so he focused on charms, transfiguration, potions, and herbology to raise their skills quickly. Dewey taught transfiguration and potions. Arwen took charms and herbology. When Mayor Lockie and Luke heard the news, they hurried to the castle, begging to join. Dewey shrugged. One sheep or a flock, same work, and enrolled Steward Edward too. The mayor and Luke flew into the castle by day and returned to city affairs by night. Busy as they were, neither considered quitting. No one would pass up tutelage from the Lord. In the potions classroom, Dewey stood at the lectern, surveying 500 students below. The extension-charmed space felt as cavernous as the Great Hall. In pairs, they sat at long tables set with cauldrons, spirit lamps, stirring rods, and ingredients. Though the room was huge, his voice reached every ear. Behind him, a giant screen displayed each step and every caution of the brew in huge, bright letters, so even the back row could see clearly. He toyed with repeating Professor Snape's famous lines. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making. As there is little foolish wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic," to shake them up, but decided it would be too theatrical. After finishing the lecture, he simply said, "All right, begin the boil cure potion. Off you go," and stepped down to patrol the aisles. Though these were adults, even seniors, and the boil cure was simple, he still feared another Neville-style cauldron catastrophe. At his command, the students began measuring and mixing in practiced pairs. To his relief, every adult cherished the rare chance for the Lord's approval. They followed his written steps to the letter, terrified of mistakes. Clumsy but careful, most ended up with a sound potion. Steward Edward and others who had brewed before handled it effortlessly, producing flawless draughts. A few with real aptitude, Buttercup, landlord of the Prancing Pony among them, turned out creditable brews despite being novices, thanks to a keen sense of heat and timing. Dew noted the standouts, earmarking them for future potions training. If a true potion master emerged, he would be overjoyed. Just as he thought the lesson would end without incident, a yell rang out. Sensing trouble, he apparated to the spot. "Protego!" he shouted. A charm flashed, forming an invisible shield over a bubbling cauldron. The cauldron exploded the next instant. The green potion ate through metal and splattered everywhere. Without the shield, the onlookers would have been scalded. They stared, hearts racing, at the corroded cauldron and the ruined desk, then at their savior in awe. Dewey turned to the culprit, eyebrows raised in exasperation. "Brog, when adding porcupine quills, you take the cauldron off the flame first. I've said it more than once." He hadn't expected his steadiest man to be the first to slip. 315, Graduate Brog, leader of the Black Barbarians, looked like a child who'd been caught doing something foolish, flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, my lord. I was in a hurry and forgot a step." "Do it again. I'll watch." Dewey wasn't angry. He waved a hand and summoned a spare cauldron and a new set of ingredients. He refused to believe someone couldn't make a simple scabies potion. Another half-hour passed, and the rest of the students finished their batches. The quality varied, but most were passable if imperfect. When Dewey inspected Brog's second attempt, a pungent yellow-green sludgy liquid, he inhaled sharply and asked lowly, "Brog, what is this?" Brog surveyed Dewey's calm face and felt a prick of panic. "Scabies potion?" he guessed. Dewey's brow twitched. He suddenly understood Professor Snape a little better. Dealing with students like this could wear anyone thin. Still, seeing Brog so anxious, he sighed and waved his hand. "Fine, that's enough for today. And don't blow up the cauldron again, or you'll have to buy your own." Dewey had to accept it. Despite having followed instructions, Brog the Black Barbarian, the tribe's strongest warrior, simply had no talent for potions. The only comfort was that, apart from Brog the Cauldron Killer, almost everyone else had produced usable potions. Of the 543 students, they ended up with over 300 usable doses of scabies potion. Dewey stored the lot in the infirmary for emergencies. After all, these were adults, much more reliable than first-year Hogwarts students. With so many hands on deck, Dewey figured potions would never be in short supply. Dewey also taught transfiguration. There were fewer surprises there, but talents varied. A few students completed transformations after only a few tries, and he made a mental note to cultivate them. The magic crash course ran on an exhausting schedule: 4 classes in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, and 2 in the evening, each 50 minutes long, designed to compress 7 years of magical education into one. Portraits handled most lessons, since they shared the teacher's knowledge and memories. Dewey and Arwen intervened only for the risky topics to prevent accidents. To Dewey's surprise, Brog, hapless in the potion room, excelled at charms, especially offensive magic. Others showed aptitude in herbology. The days blurred past, and in the blink of an eye a year had gone by. By March 2950, the crash course students were ready to graduate. They had been pushed non-stop through charms, transfiguration, potions, and herbology from years 1 to 7. When exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, Dewey supplied energy draughts, elixirs of euphoria, and even lake water brought from Hildorian, the supposed birthplace of humanity, which cleared weariness and invigorated the spirit. The result was brutal but effective. Students either broke themselves on the grind or pushed through, and their basic magical competence now matched that of ordinary wizards. Their final assessment was apparition, held on the castle's broad lawn. Dewey drew 2 circles in the grass and instructed each student to apparate from one to the other. Everyone wanted the instantaneous travel for themselves, so the field was full of eager volunteers. The results were mixed. Some lost nothing but a singed eyebrow or a lock of hair. Others fared worse, losing a fingernail, an ear, even a finger. The most terrifying case was a student who splinched in half. One half appeared in the destination circle, the other remained behind. Bystanders went pale. The student screamed, convinced he was dying. All right, it's just splinching. No one's going to die," Dewey said, sounding unruffled. He waved his wand and rejoined the separated halves, healing and repairing them with a few practiced incantations. The student stared at his whole body in stunned relief. The onlookers watched with a mixture of horror and awe. Though they had been warned about splinching, seeing it was another thing entirely. In ordinary circumstances, it might have been fatal, but with skilled magic, it was only a frightening inconvenience. Dewey handed the shaken student to Arwen for comfort and counseling while he continued the apparition exercises. After 3 months, every student had successfully mastered apparition. The magic crash course was officially complete. Dewey had plans for each graduate. Bill, who had inherited Dewey's skill at wand-making, became the castle's official wand-maker. Dewey also trained a talented pupil to craft flying broomsticks. That student would go on to manufacture brooms and help form Quidditch teams, perhaps even organize a Quidditch Cup someday. A small group of older students were put in charge of a flue powder workshop to produce and manage the castle's flue supply. Several promising students in potions and herbology were kept on for advanced study and to staff the infirmary and herb garden. Finally, Dewey selected 100 of the most capable graduates to form an Auror unit, his special forces. Led by Brog, despite the latter's lack of potion skill, they would be responsible for the security of Hogsmeade, Bree, and Isengard. Their duties would include handling serious magical incidents beyond ordinary folk, pursuing and arresting enemies, and repelling invaders. 316. Ministry of Magic. As the students of the Magic Crash Course graduated, they left the castle one after another and returned to their hometowns. Hogsmeade, Bree, and Isengard immediately became bustling. Everyone knew that the more than 500 people originally chosen had gone to the Lord's castle, learned magic, and left as wizards. Now that they had come back, curiosity and expectation filled the air. The first visible result was the creation of the Auror office. Auror headquarters was established in Hogsmeade with Brog as director, and branch offices were set up in Bree and Isengard. Aurors generally did not intervene in ordinary domestic affairs and were not under the authority of the mayors. Their main duties were to respond to incursions by dark creatures, ghouls, orcs, trolls, and to handle magical incidents and crimes committed by wizards. With over 500 new wizards now in the world and more to come, Dewey could not guarantee they would all behave. Power often breeds danger. To prevent recklessness, he had created the Auror office as a sword of Damocles hanging over them. Dewey also founded the Department of Magical Transportation. It oversaw all magical means of travel, the construction and operation of the flue network, production of flue powder, port keys, and related matters. The department only employed about a dozen people, including those Dewey had taught to make flying brooms. Its headquarters was in Hogsmeade, in the same building as the Auror office. The ministry's headquarters rose as a tall black tower on the shores of the Black Lake. More than 500 wizards had built it in a single day. During construction, they cast concealment spells so effectively that ordinary townsfolk never noticed it. It appeared non-existent to those without magic. Only those who could use magic could see the tower. Dewey named it the Ministry of Magic, and its internal layout took inspiration from the ministries of another magical world. The first floor was the main hall, a lobby and reception area filled with fireplaces, security counters, and a fountain. In the center of the fountain stood a golden dragon statue, and on the dragon's back was an image of Dewey wearing a crown of wisdom, a magnificent cloak, and holding a wand. The statue had been cast from melted gold, contributed by the 500 wizards in thanks for the Lord's benevolence. The second floor housed the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, including Auror headquarters, the judicial arm. The third floor was the Department of Magical Transportation, home to the Flue Network Administration, the Broom Administration, the Portkey Office, and related bodies. The fourth floor was the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, then mainly responsible for the wyverns at the Dragon Farm. The fifth floor was the Department of International Magical Cooperation, charged with communication and cooperation with other nations and races, elves, dwarves, men, hobbits, ents, and so on, to confront Sauron's dark forces together. The sixth floor was devoted to magical games and sports, organizing Quidditch leagues and similar events. The seventh floor handled magical accidents and catastrophes, responding to unexpected incidents. The eighth floor contained the courtroom for criminal trials. The ninth floor was the Department of Mysteries, dedicated to magical research and experiments. The 10th and top floor was reserved as the Office of the Minister for Magic, Dewey's office. For now, apart from the Auror office and the Department of Magical Transportation, most of the ministry remained largely empty. Dewey was unconcerned. As more wizards emerged and the ministry developed, the rest would fill out in time. With the returning wizards, the Department of Magical Transportation became busy first. Besides making flue powder, department staff went to towns to install dedicated fireplaces for wizard families applying to join the flue network. Wizards only needed to buy flue powder to travel by fireplace. A large scoop of flue powder, enough for a family for a month, could be purchased at the ministry's transportation department for 1 silver coin. The region's currencies, however, were a muddle. Across Middle-earth, different areas used different coins. Gondor's currency was called Castar, also known as Canis, a silver coin. Gondor also had gold coins called Mirian, plus brass and copper. Rohan used similar currencies. Elves and dwarves had their own coinages. In Eriador, west of the Misty Mountains, the situation was chaotic. Gondorian, dwarven, and elven coins were all accepted. In Bree, currency minted by the Old Kingdom of Arnor still circulated. Values varied wildly. Dwarven silver coins containing mithril were worth far more than ordinary silver and could even exceed the value of common gold coins. Elven coins, exquisitely minted and high in silver content, were also more valuable than Gondor's and Rohan's silver. Arnorian coins had collectible value and could not be treated as ordinary tender. This chaos complicated trade. Some residents unknowingly used Arnorian coins as ordinary money when trading with traveling merchants and lost out. Merchants from Gondor and Rohan used their national currencies, and the differences in value made transactions difficult. Mayors Luke and Ratch reported these problems to Dewey. Dewey's solution was straightforward: have the wizards establish a bank and issue a unified currency. He adopted the names from the other magical world, Galleon, Silver Sickle, and Bronze Nut, but simplified the exchange rates to suit Middle-earth. Instead of the complicated 17 and 29 system, he set 1 galleon equals 10 silver sickles, and 1 silver sickle equals 10 bronze nuts. The new wizard coins were minted using goblin techniques, beautifully crafted, enchanted so they would never fade or tarnish, and always gleaming, clear proof of their extraordinary origin. Soon, a white marble building named Gringotts appeared in Hogsmeade, and the new wizard currency was welcomed by the citizens of Hogsmeade and Bree. 317. 10 years. Everyone rushed to exchange their various gold, silver, and copper coins for the galleons, silver sickles, and bronze nuts issued by Gringotts. Mayors and merchants openly deposited their wealth to show support for the Lord. Mayor Luke of Hogsmeade, Mayor Lockie of Bree, and Buttercup, owner of the Prancing Pony, among them. Traveling traders were also happy to accept the new currency. The coins looked pure, were finely made, and seemed superior in every way. They were practical and collectible, so the wizarding currency spread quickly. Before long, galleons, sickles, and nuts were used across Eriador and even reached Gondor and Rohan. Eventually, they turned up as far as the Easterlings in the Far East. Gringotts in Middle-earth was not run by goblins, but by a cadre of wizards. Though it retained a degree of independence, it remained under the supervision of the Ministry of Magic. Most wizards were assigned posts in the Ministry or at Gringotts, becoming Aurors, staff in the Department of Magical Transportation, members of the Silver Staff, and similar roles. A few exceptionally talented individuals stayed at Hogwarts to pursue advanced studies and become wand makers, potion masters, herbologists, and broom makers. The rest returned home to rebuild their lives. A woman named Rose, skilled in spinning, learned a magical weaving technique from Arwen. Back in Hogsmeade, she opened Madame Rose's Robes, where she used magic to weave exquisite cloth at speed. Influenced by Arwen, her garments carried an elven grace. She even imported silk spun by giant spiders and fashioned it into sumptuous, blade-resistant, gorgeous clothes, expensive but coveted by the wealthy and exported to Rohan and Gondor. As her craft progressed, she acquired precious dragonhide from the castle and fashioned enchanted garments that offered limited protection against curses. She became renowned as a master tailor. Buttercup returned to the Prancing Pony as well. Inspired by the Lord and his time at the castle, he perfected butterbeer, a slightly alcoholic, butterscotch-like drink that wasn't greasy and could be enjoyed by all ages. Butterbeer became the Prancing Pony's signature, popular throughout Bree, Hogsmeade, the Shire, Rivendell, and Gondor. Buttercup also combined magic with brewing to create fire whiskey, a potent spirit that burned on the throat and warmed the body, ideal against cold, for bolstering courage, and for comforting the fearful. The men of the north and the dwarves took to it especially, importing it by the cartload. Buttercup grew wealthy, soon the richest man in Bree. Besides those, he brewed lighter novelties, giggling water that made drinkers laugh uncontrollably, good luck water to invigorate the spirit, and bubble water that constantly blew bubbles. His proudest creation was a dragon blood wine, made with rare dragon blood and therefore produced in tiny quantities. Favored by the Lord, it was reserved for banquets at Hogwarts. The wine was said to enhance physique and magical power, a crowning achievement for Buttercup. Other wizards found different callings. Under Dewey's guidance, clever practitioners combined magic to reproduce sweets from another world. Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, chocolate frogs, Drooble's best blowing gum, fizzing whizbees, and so on. Flying broomsticks went from novelty to common sight. People in Bree, Hogsmeade, and Isengard often flew across the sky, drawing gasps below. Unconsciously, 10 years passed. The year was 2960. Dewey presented a bottle of the elixir of life to his old friend Bilbo for his 70th birthday. The elixir preserved Bilbo's appearance, though his eyes showed a few more traces of age. He spent his days in the Shire, happily occupied with breakfast, second breakfast, elevenses, luncheon, afternoon tea, dinner, and supper. In his spare hours, he tended his garden, smoked pipeweed, read the papers, and occasionally slipped up to Hogwarts through the fireplaces when Dewey and Arwen invited him to stay. Dewey once asked if Bilbo wanted to become a wizard, but Bilbo shook his head. Contentment suited him. Along with the Took family's adventurous streak, he had the Baggins' love of peace. He admired magic, but felt no compulsion to wield it. Dewey respected him all the more for it. The hobbit, who had willingly relinquished the One Ring and who now declined the offer of magical power, embodied the purest qualities of his people. No wonder such a person would be central to the fate of Middle-earth. Over the decade, the original 500-plus wizards took many different paths. Most were adults who already had families or careers. They married, wizard to witch, wizard to non-magical partner, and had children. Remarkably, Whether both parents were magical or not, their children were born with magic. Encouraged by the Lord, most wizarding families had at least 3 children. Dewey also held another wizard quota selection, choosing 500 more candidates to undergo bloodline fusion and become full wizards. By then, nearly 3,000 wizards lived within his realm. The happiest moment for Dewey came quietly. Arwen slipped her hand over her belly, her eyes bright as starlight, and smiled. "Dewey," she said, "congratulations on becoming a father." 318. Pregnant, really? Dewey's eyes went wide in disbelief, his expression almost childlike. Arwen, glowing with a maternal calm, nodded and smiled. "It's been a month already. I only noticed yesterday." Surprise and joy swept over Dewey. He reached out to feel his wife's still flat belly, using a little magic to probe within. He felt a faint but unmistakable flutter of life. Overcome with delight, a foolish grin spread across his face as he cried, "I'm going to be a father! I'm going to be a father!" He scooped Arwen up and spun her around a few careful times, laughing and repeating the phrase as if it were a spell. Arwen wrapped her arms around his neck, indulgent and tender. When his giddy excitement subsided, Dewey's conscience pricked him. He gently set her down like one handling something precious. "No, you're pregnant now. You need to rest," he muttered, already planning. "Put everything else aside. I have to stay by your side. We must tell Lord Elrond and Lady Galadriel and hire caregivers. Ellensis for potions, Amanda for medical magic. Call them to the castle." Arwen watched his rapid-fire concern with amusement and a little patience. "Dewey, I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she soothed. "There's no need to be so frantic. My mother crossed the Misty Mountains when she was pregnant with me to visit my grandparents in Lothlorien." After she calmed him, Dewey eased off, insisting on an immediate battalion of help, but he still intended to set aside his affairs and guard her closely. He summoned Amanda, the finest in medical magic among their group, and Ellensis, the most gifted potions brewer, to the castle as a precaution. Amanda and Ellensis had been among the first students of the magic crash course. Amanda had shown exceptional talent in medical magic, and, after graduation, Arwen had arranged for her to study under Elrond in Rivendell. In the 10 years since, Amanda had perfected a wide range of medical arts. Elrond praised her skill, and even Dewey acknowledged he could not rival her expertise. Ellensis had stood out in potions. After continuing his studies at the castle and receiving Professor Snape's potion notes from Dewey, his progress accelerated. He could now brew perfect advanced potions and had even produced a cauldron of Felix Felicis. He was one step shy of becoming a potion master, the title not merely for flawless brewing, but for those who could improve or invent potions. Ellensis was already working on a draught inspired by the Ent-draughts of the Ents. Dewey also shared the news with Elrond in Rivendell and with Lord Celeborn and Lady Galadriel in Lothlorien. Elrond arrived at Hogwarts Castle via the Vanishing Cabinet without delay. Galadriel and Celeborn followed from Lothlorien. As Middle-earth's finest physician, Elrond examined Arwen at once. He beamed with the happiness of a father, but was also seriously concerned. After his examination, though, he relaxed. "Arwen's condition is good, and the children are fine," he said gently, seeing Dewey's anxious face. "You needn't worry excessively." "That's a relief," Dewey said, and then, eyes widening, he blurted, "Children?" Arwen looked surprised, too. Elrond smiled and nodded. "Yes, Arwen is carrying twins. It's early. That's why it's not obvious yet." Twins. Shock and joy mingled for Dewey. He had not expected 2 at once. Then he thought of the family. Elrond and Elros were twins, and Arwen's brothers Eladon and Elrohir were twins as well. Strong family traits, clearly. Elrond grew serious. Elven pregnancies last longer than human ones, 3 years, and the fetuses continually draw on the mother's nourishment and magic. Twins increase the strain. Arwen will be more vulnerable. During this time, there must be no accidents. Her nutrition and magical replenishment must be ensured. Once we return to Rivendell, I will prepare potions suited for pregnancy. When Arwen is further along, she must take them regularly. "I've noted it," Dewey responded solemnly, committing every word to memory. "I'll follow your instructions." Lady Galadriel, who had come with them, spoke up. "They are first-time parents and inexperienced. I will stay until Arwen has given birth." Hearing that, both Elrond and Dewey expressed grateful relief. "Then we trouble you, Lady Galadriel," Elrond said warmly. Galadriel waved off the thanks and moved close to Arwen, a protective presence. Arwen is my granddaughter. With Celebrian across the sea, it is my place to look after her. With Celebrian having sailed to the Blessed Realm and Dewey having no parents to call on, Galadriel's care fell naturally to her. She took up residence at Hogwarts Castle to oversee Arwen's health. Celeborn, after confirming his granddaughter was well, returned to Lothlorien, but kept sending elven foods, nutritional supplies, and other comforts. Elrond returned to Rivendell to prepare the potions and nutrient solutions Arwen would need, but he made regular visits to check on her. Eladon and Elrohir, who were traveling, hurried to the castle upon hearing the news. Friends, like Bilbo and Gandalf, either came in person or sent gifts. The household and the surrounding territory celebrated. Lanterns and streamers were hung. Citizens rejoiced that the lady of the manor would bear an heir, and the local wizards raised their wands to send magical fireworks into the sky. For a while, Bree, Hogsmeade, and even Isengard buzzed with excitement. 319, the Pen of Acceptance and the Book of Admission. On a high platform in a Malorn tree at Weathertop Castle, Galadriel and Arwen sat side by side. A gentle breeze stirred the golden leaves while the red sunset bathed the castle in a warm crimson glow. Far below, the city's magical fireworks flared and faded against the darkening sky. Galadriel watched her granddaughter with fond eyes and said softly, "Arwen, you seem to be thriving here. I am relieved. I think Celebrian would be pleased for you as well." Arwen leaned against her grandmother, smiling brightly. "Grandmother, do not worry. Dewey has been very kind to me, and I am very happy here." She reached out without thinking to rest a hand on her belly, her expression soft and affectionate. "And now there is a child. I will be a good mother and give them all the love and protection I can." As the months passed, Arwen's once flat belly curved gently into a small swell. Dewey grew increasingly nervous, hovering over his wife, never quite allowing himself to relax. He watched her constantly, taut with worry. Seeing him more anxious than she was, Arwen found it both amusing and a little exasperating. She did her best to soothe him. Galadriel, half amused and half exasperated, finally used a touch of her authority to send Dewey away, insisting he busy himself with affairs of state and not pester Arwen. Dewey understood his excess and forced himself to step back, occupying himself with work to calm his nerves. Over the past 10 years, the number of wizards in the territory had grown to nearly 3,000. They had settled in Bree, Hogsmeade, and Isengard, and as their numbers swelled, a wizarding market had naturally formed. The busiest such market was in Hogsmeade, a whole street Dewey had named Diagon Alley. It was everything a wizarding street should be: wandmakers, robes, books, an owlery, a potions shop, a flying broomstick emporium, a flue powder shop, and more. At the far eastern end of the street stood Gringotts Wizarding Bank, which had 2 doors of equal importance. The front door opening to Hogsmeade's main thoroughfare for ordinary folk to exchange and deposit galleons, sickles, and nuts, and a back door that faced Diagon Alley and served the wizarding clientele. At Diagon Alley's western extremity loomed the Ministry of Magic Tower. Diagon Alley buzzed with life. Wizards rubbed shoulders with dwarves and elves. Busy owls wheeled overhead, carrying letters and parcels. Thanks to Dewey, many wizards preferred owls as messengers and companions, and now almost every wizarding household kept at least one. Mischievous children zipped through the alley on toy-flying broomsticks, causing delighted cries and hurried dodges. With the Ministry of Magic's Department of Magical Transportation operating energetically, flue network fireplaces had been linked across other regions of Middle-earth, and flue powder was being sold widely. A large scoop cost 1 silver sickle, affordable for a family's monthly needs. Many dwarven, elven, and human houses had arranged to connect their fireplaces to the network. Ever since the first group of Magic Crash Course graduates founded families and careers, the oldest of that original generation of young wizards had reached 10 years of age. In the magical world of this place, a wizarding child receives an admission letter to a magical school when they turn 11, officially beginning their formal studies. Dewey did not intend to leave these children to grow up unstructured. Adult wizards differed in their talents and temperaments. Having children learn casually from their parents would not create a consistent educational system. Dewey planned to establish Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry properly and send out admission letters when the children reached 11. Unlike the informal crash course, Hogwarts would employ a graded curriculum, teaching magic through 7-year divisions from basic to advanced. By next year, the first cohort would be ready to receive admission letters. Although the ministry could compile names and numbers, Dewey decided it would be better to create the legendary instruments of selection themselves, the accepting quill and the book of admissions. These tools would help manage quotas and simplify the issuing of admission letters. The accepting quill would be a magical quill that could detect nascent magical talent among children across Britain. When a child first demonstrated true magical aptitude, the quill would lift from a silver inkwell and write the child's name in the book of admissions. The book would oversee the quill's work, reviewing names recorded by the quill. It would refuse to let the quill write the name of anyone who lacked sufficient evidence of magic. For instance, a child who briefly exhibited magic, but through misfortune or neglect, lost it and became a squib, would have their name removed. The book would prevent an admission letter from being sent to someone who no longer possessed magic. Creating the two items was not beyond Dewey's abilities. His only real dilemma was how large a detection range these artifacts should have. Hogsmeade and Bree lay relatively close to Hogwarts, but Isengard was thousands of miles away. Extending the quill and book to cover Hogsmeade, Bree, and Isengard would amount to scanning the vast western continent beyond the Misty Mountains, a scope even a Palantir could not fully cover. Dewey also wondered whether Hogwarts should admit only children from his own territory or invite others, elves, for example. Elven development posed particular complications. Elven children learn to talk, walk, and dance early, but then grow more slowly. Where a human child may be an adult in 20 years, an elf could remain childlike in appearance for centuries. An elf often does not reach full physical maturity until 50, and mental adulthood until around 100. Dewey had met elven children in Rivendell and Lothlorien who looked like 7- or 8-year-olds while being older in years. Given these differences, Dewey resolved to seek consent. He would consult Lady Galadriel and Lord Elrond about whether their people would permit elven youths to attend Hogwarts. If the elves were uninterested, he would limit the detection range to his territory and not make the artifact's reach excessively broad. At worst, he could craft a small replica of the accepting quill and book of admissions for Isengard, the farthest stronghold, to select candidates locally. With Arwen expecting and the wizarding community growing into a proper society, Dewey set himself to the task, building institutions that would endure and making choices that would shape the next generation of wizards. 320. Admission quota. Dewey planned to open a school of magic on Middle-earth and admit students to study the arcane arts. When he told Galadriel and Elrond, they both welcomed the idea and wanted elven children to come to Hogwarts Castle to learn magic. Although elves are an innately magical race, they do not cast spells in the same active, formulaic way wizards do. Elven magic tends toward a latent integration with nature, controlling natural forces, enchanting objects, and communicating telepathically. Aside from ancient high elves like Galadriel and Elrond, who could wield great sorceries, ordinary elves depended more on their exceptional physical prowess, exquisite martial skills, and enchanted weaponry. Elven magic felt older and more primitive, long, complex, often ritualistic, while a wand serves as a conduit, focusing and stabilizing a wizard's energy into clear, repeatable effects when paired with incantations and gestures. That principle applied to elves as well. Arwen, Elladan, Elrohir, Legolas, and others all had wands made by Dewey and had taken lessons from him. With those wands and their training, their powers far outstripped those of elves their age. Over time, the reputation of wand makers and wand shops in Diagon Alley drew even more elves eastward. Many paid dearly for wands and bought magical books for self-study. The books sold in Diagon Alley contained only basic magic and no offensive curses, but they were treasured by the elves who came. As a result, it became common to see elves carrying an elven blade in one hand and a wand in the other. Still, most had never received formal, systematic magical education and relied on self-study and experimentation, so they could learn only basic spells. Even so, blessed with wise minds and long lifespans, they pushed those simple spells to their limits. They loved lumos, for example, and developed its use into something like a holy light, a light that banished darkness and purified corruption. Dewey himself was astonished and recorded this upgraded lumos effect in a spellbook as an enhanced version. Once Galadriel and Elrond agreed to send elven children to Hogwarts, Dewey set about crafting an acceptance quill and the Book of Admissions. To be useful in Middle-earth, these instruments needed a detection range far beyond the narrow reach Hogwarts used in the other world. The British detection field covered only Britain, which is small compared to Eriador, let alone the whole of Middle-earth. Dewey intended something much grander, an acceptance quill and book that could detect the entire continent. That would demand immense magic and steadfast materials. Reluctantly, Dewey plucked a phoenix tail feather from himself for the quill and took a slab of the hardest dragon hide from the frost dragon's chest for the book. After 6 months of work, a magnificent gold and red quill and a thick black dragonhide book sat on his workbench. Dewey invited Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf to witness the binding. He pointed his wand at the 2 items and began to channel his magic, chanting the enchantments. The phoenix quill and dragonhide book floated, glowing as Dewey poured himself into them. Seeing that, the 3 elders raised their hands. The rings of the elves on their fingers flared to life, and torrents of power far greater than Dewey's surged into the acceptance quill and the book. The items drank in the magic like gluttons, emitting stronger and stronger magical fluctuations. An invisible force radiated outward from them, expanding rapidly. Close by, those present could feel it. At a distance, it would have been imperceptible. The field burst through the walls of Hogwarts, swept over Hogsmeade at the mountain's foot, stretched to Bree, and spread across the whole of Eriador. It did not stop there. The force ignored barriers. It crossed the misty mountains to touch Rivendell and Lothlorien, spread into Mirkwood, reached Erebor and the Iron Hills, and brushed the lands of the Easterlings. To the south it extended over Isengard, Rohan, Gondor, even into Mordor, Harad, and Khand. In Barad-dûr, Sauron's great eye turned westward, as if sensing the intrusion. At last, the invisible field had nearly blanketed the entire continent and then stilled. Dewey lowered his wand, exhausted. Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf ceased channeling through their rings as well. No single hand could have stretched the detection net that far. It had required the 3 powerful figures and their rings. But it had worked. The acceptance quill and Book of Admissions hummed with lasting magic as if newly alive. The book opened its blank pages on its own. The quill darted and landed upon it. Without ink, it wrote in smooth, dark green script, lines of names, birth dates, and addresses, precise and clear. Dewey read over the entries: young witches and wizards from Hogsmeade, Bree, and Isengard, elven children from Rivendell, Lothlorien, Mirkwood, Lindon, and even Dorwinion in the far east. Among the names was Grimbeorn, son of Beorn the Skin Changer, from the Anduin Valley, apparently inheriting his father's gifts and showing magical aptitude. Grimbeorn had been born in 2950, making him 10 years old now, the right age for the first intake to Hogwarts. The quill and book recorded nearly everyone with magical potential across Middle-earth, infants through 11-year-olds and adults alike. Even Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf's names appeared. Sauron's name appeared too, but it was faint, its letters dim among the others.